Hello, beloveds. Welcome to Bevin, a femme over 40 and her friends podcast. I'm your host, Bevin. I've said my name 3 times. It's time to start the show. This is Biscuit Reynolds. I'm pointing to a portrait of my feline overlord who is in the afterlife, but I feel still participates in a co-hosting capacity. I used to call him my business. I still call him my business partner in all things. And then I had a psychic recently who was asking about work stuff. And she said, yeah, you should consult Biscuit Reynolds. I was like, are you serious? But it's kind of funny. You make a joke enough times and then eventually it becomes real. So, if you have a feline overlord in the afterlife, maybe connect with them for advice. I'm really excited about today's episode. I have witnessed during the last few years several of my friends, because obviously I'm queer, talk about that a lot. But as a queer femme, a lot of the people in my communities have either been like super witchy woo, right? Like I remember being like totally like not a believer of any kind of I think I was open to the idea of God, but I wasn't like a practicing anything, right? But I remember being in queer community with people who are like super woo. And now I would identify myself as one of the super woo people. Okay, right? So like people can change. I change and evolve all the time. Even though I have a lot of earth in my chart. I'm a very earth-based person. And Earth is typically the sign that doesn't change much and is slow to change. Speaking of Earth, Melissa, my guest on this podcast, is triple Earth. And I have witnessed her, as many people in my life have, like where I know you from the queer community, but then watching people kind of develop a spiritual practice. So we had a really great discussion about the development of her practice and how she's kind of reclaimed elements of Catholicism, which was part of her upbringing, and like the folk traditions from that. And she has a really good perspective on that. So if you're someone who's like kind of exploring spirituality, this is a great episode for that. Or if you're just curious about spirituality, but you don't really know where to start, like I think Melissa's story is really helpful for that. Also, she's kind of your expert of, not kind of, she is an expert, I would say, on bisexuality and polyamory and offers a lot of cool programs on that. And I know a lot of my podcast listeners are themselves bisexual, are themselves partnered to men, but long for a queer identity and don't really know how to do that. And Melissa is excellent at navigating that. She does relationship coaching, one-on-one offerings. Like her links are all in the show notes, so please check that out. Also, she does group bisexual support groups and heartbreak support groups. So she's got a lot to offer for folks who I know are in my podcast audience. So I thought this is like, it's almost like I'm like a matchmaker for you with like all my friends, of course, but like, especially Melissa. I was like, I got to get Melissa on the podcast because I think like what I'm hearing from the folks who listen to my podcast are like some synchronicities there. Melissa also has a PhD and has thoughts about the academic industrial complex, which I have strong thoughts about the academic industrial complex as well. And we talk about that too. So this is a great episode. I'm really excited for you to meet her. She's someone I always like to say, like, how do I know somebody? I know Melissa from the internet, like chronically online people in queer femme communities. And she's like, we're like friends in law. Like, so many of my good friends were friends with Melissa. And so like, that's kind of how we cross paths. And then, just long enough lingering in someone's online sphere, you feel like you know them, right? So online friends are real friends, and I will say that. And let's see. Now, the best way to support my podcast, this is my little commercial for my Patreon, is my Patreon page, patreon.com/FKDP, which stands for Fat Kid Dance Party. So if you've ever felt too much or too awkward to dance or been called too fat, this is the supportive class for you. My class, I offer a lot of online options. So I have on-demand classes that are available at a tier on my Patreon level. If you join at the $10 level, you get access to all my Zoom classes. And so it's just a really cool community. If you want to learn how to regard your body with love and grace, like I have the cheat codes for you because I've been working on this stuff for me for the last 20 something years, and I want to make it easier for you. So it's always been on my heart to help create a purpose to my pain, right? Like I was so self-loathing for so long and really had to turn the ship around on self-image and body image. And I've done it quite well, I think. And I'm still obviously still have more to do because if we don't have lessons we're learning, then we don't get to keep our incarnation, right? Like the whole point, I believe the whole point of incarnating is to learn lessons. So like there's a fallacy in coloniality that says, oh, there's a finish line on anything, and there's not. And so I think there's a part in our healing journey where we realize, oh, there's never going to be healed. It's just always going to continue to unfold, isn't it? So anyway, surrender to the journey. That's what I keep doing. Anyway, patreon.com/FKDP. That supports my podcast, which is free. It supports my free blog, queerfatfemme.com, and all of the archives. And also, I just really want to help you. So that's there. My podcast and my blog are there to help as well. And I hope that you enjoy this conversation. And if you feel moved to work with Melissa, please do. I just really am here to support small businesses and people out there who are also here to help and have really unique things to offer. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks for tuning in. Melissa, welcome to the podcast.
I'm so excited. I'm really just excited to talk to you, but then to be on the podcast at the same time is phenomenal.
I am simultaneously excited to talk to you and also very excited to introduce you to my listeners. Based on a lot of listener feedback, lately, I'm getting a lot of bisexual babes who are like, you know, married to heterosexual men and things that you really cover at length in your work. And so I want to introduce them all to you, but everyone to you because you're just delightful and charming.
I'm so excited to talk about this because it's one of my favorite things to talk about, even though it's not really my experience. I feel so strongly for my bisexual community and for bisexual women. And it's just true that most bisexual women are in relationships with cis men. That's just true. And I think really creating space for people in that situation to feel more validated and safe and secure is really important.
Yeah, and what a resource too, because it's not like it's the most common experience, even though I feel like objectively I observe it as being pretty common. So like, you know, in straight monoculture, they don't talk about that. But here in the queer land,
Oh yeah, here in Queerland we talk about it all the time. And the actual fact is, according to Pew Research Center, 84% of bisexual people in committed relationships are in relationships with quote unquote the opposite sex or the gender we're socialized to be attracted to. So it is, and bisexuals make up the biggest part of the LGBTQ community. So it's like literally most queer people arguably are in this experience. And yet people feel really alone in it.
something I have learned from you is the best way to find out about someone's identity is to ask them about it. So rather than assume you know what it means to be bisexual, ask the bisexual to explain what that means to them. So, Melissa, what does it mean to you? How would you define bisexual?
Wow, I love you throwing that back at me. I do think it's important because it means different things to different people. So for me, I think of myself as oriented bisexual. Like, I know that I have the capacity to be attracted to people of all genders, but I also identify as like a political lesbian. So I only date sapphics,
How do you define sapphics?
if that makes sense. Anyone who themselves, I guess, identifies as sapphic. I would say, I mean, you could make the argument anyone but cis men can be sapphic. Um, yeah, so that could be women, cis and trans men, trans masc, trans femme, non-binary people. People, I think sapphic to me is about a reverence for women and for femininity, like a deep spiritual respect for divine feminine energy. And I think as a femme, that's really important to me. Not necessarily to be worshipped, but something like that, something close to it. So yeah, that's how I think of sapphic, I think.
I love worship energy. I think it's really hot. Like, I want someone, it was funny because I was just talking about this person I met who I felt like was a little bit mesmerized by me at a certain point. And then a friend of mine reflected, like, I want people you're with to be mesmerized by you. And one of my favorite things about my last partnership was like how obsessed she was with me, you know, like I loved that energy and that connection and that like cheerleading and all of that. Like, yes, please, more, please. Right. Like I try to also do that with my friends too, to just like express my devotion and my care and my worship of them always instead of bottling it up, because I think that's, you know, a regret I have with other relationships that can't exist in the earth plane together because they're not on the earth plane anymore.
Mm, absolutely. That's one of my favorite things about a butch femme or masc femme dynamic is I feel like there is a lot of worship that feels like it's inherent to that dynamic that is so powerful and beautiful. That is so different from what you get from cis men. I have never in my life felt worshipped by a cis man. I have felt loved, appreciated, beautiful, all of those things, but worshipped is a really different experience. And I think there's something unique about someone who has a relationship to womanhood loving a woman. There's just something about that that is so special. But I agree. If you don't think you caught lightning in a bottle with me, you can go.
Yeah. It's all in full body yes, or it's a no for me. And that's for romantic things and like a casual hangout. Like if my body is not feeling resonant with it, it's a no. And I'm just learning more and more the abundance of protecting my rest and my alone time by only really doing the things that feel worthwhile.
And even thinking about friendship, like you said, the most when I realized that the most transformative relationships I've ever had have been with mostly femmes, so like femships, but like girlhood friendship, female friendship, whatever. That completely changed the way that I started thinking about relationships. And so, similarly, I want to have friends around me who I'm just amazed by, that just blow me away. That's what I want in my life. I want to just feel constant awe at the people around me, which I guess is why I don't spend a lot of time with cis men. They tend not to inspire awe in me. It's rare.
You know what? I love that. And I love how you decenter men because like we live in a monoculture that really centers men and masculinity and like it's boring. Like if I have a man in my life, it's because I really like because they feel like family. You know what I mean? And then otherwise it's just
Mm,
women centered life or queer centered life, you know, and that feels right to me.
absolutely. I feel like the two men that I hold close who aren't literally like blood family, I've known for like 20 years. And I'm like, you just can't, just like, there's something about a really long term relationship like that that's like, I can't get rid of you. If I met them today, maybe things would be different, but it's like, I love you and you love me so deeply that you can stay around.
Yeah. And it's like also okay to like need to take space. Like when I first found like fat queer community, like really like shifted my entire lifestyle to just be about those places and those common identities. And I had a lot to learn about like just because someone's queer doesn't mean they're actually trustworthy. And just because someone's fat doesn't mean like they have solidarity for you. Right. Like, but recognizing like I really needed that as like an antidote to having lived most of my life up until then. This is when I was about 22, in like this monoculture that taught me negative lies about my body and my sexuality.
And I think that, and I feel like I'm talking a lot about why I decenter men, and obviously I want to get to like I don't want that to be alienating for people in relationships with men. But it also makes me think about that how many cis men have actually done the work to unpack and unlearn those lies.
Mhm.
And I just find it's very rare to find even men who are feminist or leftist, etc. I have experienced as very misogynistic, and it's a lot. And to be around other people who are unlearning the way that our society teaches us to be is so important. And obviously, the more privilege and power you hold, the less motivation you have to unlearn that because it benefits you.
One of the first days in one of my women's studies classes, she quoted a fortune cookie, which is that like those who have been given a good deal don't ask for a new deal. Like if you've got a full house in your hand, like why would you ask for a new deal, right? Like that's what privilege does. And so it is rare but possible for them
It's
to,
possible.
it's possible. And I think a lot of times, like our brains go to a place that wants like our ego is very deceptive because it will tell us things that we need to hear to feel safe, and sometimes the truth doesn't feel safe, you know, like if you're with someone who like actively tears you down all the time, like your brain, like your attachment system, all that stuff is just going to convince you, oh no, they're one of the good ones, oh that it doesn't affect me, you know, like I've lived it. I've lived so many lies to myself. And now I've done a lot of healing work where I'm able to be with the truth in a way because I can be with uncertainty and discomfort because I just keep practicing it.
Yeah, we also live in a world, right, where in the ways in which you're marginalized, you're dealing with both micro and macro aggressions every day of your life. So I feel like it's not until when you're talking about the interpersonal, it's like not until, oh, I'm purposely taking a step back from this, that then it almost becomes way more obvious versus when, oh, at a time in my life where I was dating men or had a lot of friends who were men, I felt less impacted by those kinds of microaggressions. And now that I don't spend time with men, it's actually so much louder when I'm with them. And it's like once, yeah, I just feel like once you really, that's the idea, I think, of the decentering men is it's not you can't have men in your life or even you can't date men, but what happens when you um focus your energy on people who are marginalized in the ways that you are and also other ways, like how powerful is that? How big of a difference does that play in your life? And in big and small differences, it's like astounding.
Oh, absolutely. And it's also like I think a very important form of self-care to curate your life in a way that feels in alignment with your values and how you want to continue to experience life because you become the five people you spend the most time with. So who do you want it to be like, right?
Yeah, and research on friendship and community also shows that speaking of the number five, we really can only handle having five very close people to us at any moment. Like we form community or friendships in concentric circles of kind of like tiers. And in our tier one, really only like five people can be in there. And so it's also how much energy do I have? Who do I want to give that energy to? If I'm going to give the most energy to five people, who do I want those people to be? Um, yeah.
Yeah. Melissa, tell us about your relationship coaching and the other things you offer folks one-on-one. I usually do business in the front, but we got started with the juicy stuff. So I know that you help people untangle this stuff.
We did.
Yes.
I do. So I call my work politicized relationship coaching because I do relationship coaching for highly politicized people. So people who are leftist, who are trying to align their political values in their actions, behaviors, relationships, interpersonally. Most of the people I work with are either bisexual, so they're working on bisexual identity, being living their most queer life while in a relationship that passes as straight. Or I have a lot of clients who are navigating non-monogamy. Those are the two big ones. But I work on other issues too, like heartbreak, intimate partner violence, attachment, especially avoidant attachment, sexuality and eating disorder recovery. Those are some of the issues that I work with. And I also run support groups. So I'm toward the end of running a bisexual support group right now. And in November, I'm starting a healing from heartbreak support group. And I'm trying to decide for the new year if I want to do a like bisexual support group, like part two, like advanced, um, or if I want to do some kind of a non-monogamy support group. But yeah, so it's the one-on-one coaching and support groups are most of my life.
And I'm going to put links to everything that you offer and slash your website in the show notes so you can link up directly with Melissa there. But I really just want to encourage people, like, if you're thinking about making changes in your life, like, get support. Like, we're not meant to do things alone. We're interdependent by nature, and there happen to be people who have walked the path, who are willing and resourced to help you walk the path and shine a flashlight. It's hard. It's hard to.
Oh, it is. It is. And I work with coaches, therapists, etc. when I need help. So we all should. It's not something, life is not something where like we get to some destination and we're done needing support. And I think when we're adults, we have a hard time admitting we need help. But we do, especially when we're doing something new or exploring something new. It's great to have guidance.
Yeah, the it takes a village thing is actually really true. And in fact, not that long ago in human history, we had a village to support us. And like now we kind of have to pay for our village, which is wild under capitalism, but like also, scholarships available, sliding scales are available places. I've been seeing my therapist as a coach for years and years, and I'm on his sliding scale, and I'm so grateful. He's been so, just even for me, like shifting into from being like not spiritual and not really following my intuition to like being spiritual but also not following my intuition, and then wanting to live this life where I'm leaning into my intuition even though it doesn't make sense in a material realm. My therapist has helped me so much with that because he's like, when you interview therapists, I don't think you always think about all the things to ask, because I wanted body positive and queer.
Mm-hmm.
And I got those two things out of him. And then when I started saying, like, actually, I need to start leaning into my intuition more, I found out he's into astrology and tarot in like a major way. So it's been really cool to like have him help me like be present for both my material needs and like listening to these whispers of my spirit that sound crazy, but like I might as well do the thing because my intuition has 100% success rate so far. Um, even though I haven't always listened to it, right? So clearly.
Absolutely. Yes. It's astounding. You can find help in like any realm that you need to. And so it's always worth exploring that, I think.
Melissa, you have leaned into spirituality and folklore, and it's been really fun. As someone who follows you on the internet, I love Melissa's stories, by the way. If you're an IG stories person, like her aesthetic is amazing, and like your stories are always informative. And I'm curious, like, how you would describe, like, how you got into kind of leaning into like tarot and Italian folklore practices and things like that.
I mean, being a marginalized person in the world, so in my case, for example, a queer woman in the world, the systems that exist that uphold something like religion, they're not made for me. They're not made for you. The church, like capital letter, the church, TM, um, is not there to be supportive of these kinds of marginalized experiences. So I'm Italian American. Both of my parents are Italian American. All of my, the ancestors of mine who immigrated to the United States immigrated from Southern Italy and Sicily. And so, unsurprisingly, I grew up Catholic. I grew up Catholic, and it never, it didn't quite make sense to me. I really struggled with the idea of there being this like one powerful, all-knowing God who is referred to as a man. And Catholicism in particular, this is what made me come back to it. Catholicism in particular is so weird because in practice, it's a polytheistic religion. In practice, it is polytheistic, but in theory, they will tell you it's monotheistic, that there is one God. But when you think about the sign of the cross, it's, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. That's the Trinity. Catholicism very strongly reveres Mary or the Madonna. There's, or the Virgin. There's saints that you are literally supposed to pray to. You're supposed to pray to saints. And it's just funny to me that we then say, oh, yeah, but there's only God. Clearly not. So Catholicism just always felt confusing to me. I found myself more drawn to, like, when I was learning in school, in like grade school, about, like ancient Egyptian religion and mythology and spirituality, like that made more sense to me. And Greek and Roman, ancient Greek and Roman mythology made more sense to me. But my parents, being Catholic, were just like, no, we made a vow to the church that we were going to raise you Catholic, so you can't explore any of these things. You're not allowed. And so, particularly as a teenager and a queer woman, I was like, fuck this. I became very, very removed from the church, very hateful toward the church. Also in my childhood, the Catholic Church, quote unquote, scandal became, child abuse became very clearly known. And I grew up in Boston. So, I mean, that was big in my childhood. So I just was like, no, fuck the church. And I still feel that way. But as I got older, I started feeling like here's this huge part of my cultural experience, my ethnic experience that's missing. And obviously, being Italian and being Catholic, it's not a one-to-one experience, but I mean, it's close. It's close. That Venn diagram is almost a circle. And so it was really hard for me to not embrace Catholic iconography. So images of the Madonna, stained glass, the rosary, these sorts of things had played such a huge role in my life growing up that it was hard to dismiss them. And so I started to reincorporate the imagery, and then also realized with the whole story and history of like forced assimilation in various ways, that Catholicism has so many roots, just like all Christian religions, has such deep root in folk spirituality, right? How are you going to get people to convert to your religion if you're not, making it somewhat similar to what they're already practicing? And when I discovered the idea of folk Catholicism, which is basically what my ancestors back were practicing before they were kind of taken by the church, that became just fascinating to me. That was just like fascinating to me. Like, here are these people who, yes, have some connection to the roots of this religion of Catholicism that I grew up with, but who also celebrate ancient, quote unquote, Roman mythology. Like, that's also important to these people. And tarot, there's like a long history depending on what you look at and who you ask. Some people say that tarot is like started in Italy. I mean, what is now Italy? Like, that is part of the culture. I thought about these weird kind of folk tales that exist within my family that I didn't realize were Italian specific until I got older. I'm like, that's magic. What you're talking about is magic. That's a spell. That's all that is. That's not, you know. And so I think, yeah, when I made all of these connections, I just was like, I want to dig into that more.
What are some of your favorite rituals that you've picked up in your practice?
A ritual is such an interesting idea to me. I love the idea of ritual. My chart is super earthy
Ooh, give
and
us your
super
big three.
watery.
I know you're triple earth up top.
I know, this is terrible. My sun is in Capricorn, my rising is Taurus, and my moon is Virgo. So my big three, actually, I was thinking about it just recently. My big six, even, it is all earth and water, except for one. My Mercury is in Sagittarius. But
Me too.
which also makes a lot of sense.
I'm a
Oh,
Sagittarius.
really?
Mercury. Yes. What's your Venus and Mars?
Oh, wow. They're both Pisces.
Oh, tender. And then Venus would be your chart ruler, your Venus and Pisces. I have a friend.
Yes.
My friend Jana, who's been on this podcast a couple of times, is also a Taurus rising with Venus and Pisces, and it's like you both have like the strongest house plant game.
It's truly like, yeah, it's a softness. I think I have a Capricorn stellium. I have a couple of planets in Scorpio. I think I can have a very intimidating, quote unquote, like demeanor, but I think at my heart, I'm really soft. And I think the Taurus rising Venus in Pisces is just, I'm just a softie at the end of the day. Um, so yeah, I think ritual, then the practicality of it, the kind of organization of it is really attractive to my earth energy. And then the spirituality and intuition of it is really attractive to my water energy. So I love ritual. I think anything can be a ritual. I think sweeping in the morning is a ritual. I think that I have like a candle lit right here just to like, and I'm gonna blow it out when we end our call. You know, that to me is ritual. Having a glass of wine before going to bed, ritual. Like I think you can ritualize anything that you do with intention that you yeah, just intentionally like imbue with meaning, I think is ritual. And so I try to live my life in a lot of ritualistic ways, which could become maybe compulsive, but that's okay.
I mean, it's also a mindfulness practice, right? Like we use, I think using our senses to bring us into the present moment is so good. And I love ritual, just like in the mundane. There's a really good abundance practice I tried to adopt for a while, but I really struggled with cleaning, which is like sweeping every morning. Like it's a thing. I forget which culture it's from, but like it's a practice to just brighten up the energy, right? And so, oh, it's been a while since I vacuumed.
Listen, absolutely. Even when I first moved into this apartment, they were like, take a look around. If there's anything that needs to be fixed, let us know. And within 24 hours, I was like, the screens on my windows are broken. I need that fixed because I love an open window and I don't love bugs. So
Mhm.
it's like I was like, this needs to be fixed immediately because I do feel a sense of just I love the feeling of you wake up in the morning and you open the windows, even in the dead of winter, and it's like I'm letting this new energy like through the house. That's just so important to me.
Yes. Oh, I love that. I love fresh air. Full same. And I live now rurally. And when I would visit my mom when she was living up here, I would sleep like 12 hours my first couple nights when I was visiting because the clean, fresh air was just so good and saturating for me. Oh, I love that. Okay. You are a PhD. You have
I am.
you have letters behind your name. You worked really hard on your dissertation. I even have held your dissertation as a book because it is so good and it is now a thing. Tell me about what made you decide to pursue a PhD and do you feel good? How do you feel about the academic industrial complex for those out there who might be considering PhD life?
So when you said you have a PhD, what I wanted to say is like, or that I am a PhD, I am unfortunately. So that should tell you everything. Okay. I I do have a PhD. I have a PhD in human sexuality studies. I love that. It's very unique. Sexuality specific programs are very hard to come by versus women's gender and sexuality studies programs. Something specific to sexuality. At the time that I started my PhD program, Widener University, where I went, was the only fully accredited human sexuality PhD program in, I think, the world, but definitely the country. Now there are a few more that have cropped up, which is great. But here's the thing. A PhD is not what I think a lot of people imagine. I think, first of all, there's an issue with capitalism where with the recession. So I graduated undergrad in 2007, so right into a recession. And I think a lot of people couldn't get jobs. And so they went to graduate school. And at the same time, because so many people were applying to jobs, because people were losing jobs, A lot of job descriptions were requiring higher degrees, really just to weed out applications. And so it made sense, I think, for a lot of people. Okay, I'm going to go get a master's degree. I loved having a master's degree. I loved my master's program. I think master's degrees are totally worthwhile. A lot of us go into undergrad not really knowing what we want to do in life, which is valid because we're young when we do that. I love the idea, if it's, accessible to people, of doing the bachelor's and then having some time in the world to figure out where they want to focus their energy and going for a master's. Like, that makes total sense to me. Master's degrees, I find, are super practical. They're very much, mine's in education. And I learned far more in my master's program in education than I did in my bachelor's program in education. Um, Things that were way more useful to the practicality of being in a classroom or facilitating a group, versus I felt my bachelor's was much more theoretical, and theory doesn't really help you be a teacher. So I loved doing a master's program, highly recommend. A PhD, totally different world, a totally different world. It is not practical unless you want to be a researcher. If you are like, I literally want to do research, that is what I want to do with my life, go for it. Because the PhD, the kinds of classes you take are all about research. You're taking quantitative research classes, qualitative research classes, literature review type classes. You're taking classes on how to do research. And generally at the end of a PhD program within the sciences, so like a PhD specifically, your dissertation is just a research project. So it's teaching you how to be a researcher. You're not really learning subject matter. You might pick up some stuff because within the broader, like for me, human sexuality, while we're learning how to do um, research, they're using examples from the field. So like you do pick up information, but really the subject matter that you get into is what you write your dissertation on. And in order to write a dissertation or to do any research study, you're looking at a super niche question. The goal is to ask a question that's never been asked, or that to do research that hasn't been done. So that's super niche. And you end up being like the foremost expert on this very niche question. And that I don't think is terribly useful or fun. And so if you are considering doing a PhD, I would say only do it if your goal is to be a researcher or to be a professor, or if for whatever trajectory you're planning on, you actually need a PhD to do it. If you do not need a PhD, it is an enormous waste of time, energy, and money to get one. Don't do it. That is my advice. I wish I didn't. I don't know that it's definitely not improved my life in any way. I don't necessarily make more money. People think I know more than I do, maybe. Or sometimes people will call me doctor, or I'll have mail addressed to me as doctor. But that's not worth the amount of money that I spent on the PhD. So I think for me it was more of a, I don't know, an intellectual pursuit of like kind of wanting to prove to myself that that was something I could do. But it's honestly a traumatizing system, and it's a very traumatizing process. And I say that as someone who has a lot of privilege, and it was very intellectually and spiritually traumatizing. So I can't say I recommend it.
I can say the same exact thing about my JD. It's fun to be a doctor of laws and to say that, but it is very traumatizing. It's a very traumatizing. I mean, law school actually goes out of its way to be extra traumatizing, I think. But it's not necessary, and unless it like absolutely, because like I have a Reagan Chastain, famed leader in the body positive movement, just got a master's because she said there are doors that were closed to me because I didn't have letters after my name. And I'm like, really good reason, you know? And so like if there are physical doors you want to open, but like I will tell you, they told me, I remember this so clearly at my law school orientation. They said you can always get a job with a JD, and that is totally false. And like frequently I was out of consideration for jobs because of my JD. So it's funny that like some jobs want the higher degrees, a lot of jobs do not, and because they don't want to pay you, they're worried about like you knowing too much about the law, even if whatever you're doing isn't the law. And I will say this, I've realized that there are lessons I've been learning in my 40s that like I could have learned in my teens if I had followed the desires of my heart at that time. And so instead
Mm.
of like following a path that I was talented at and other people's good ideas for me, instead of actually taking risks and learning these lessons that my soul really wanted to experience. Because like you can run away from yourself as much as you want to, but eventually like you hit like a brick wall and like you're going to have to deal with yourself.
I love your point about actually becoming a liability in the job market. That's a really important point too. If you have a terminal degree, you almost can only do the job that the terminal degree is for because other people will not hire you. They don't want to pay you. They think you're overqualified. They can't imagine that you would like enjoy the job. Even if you're saying, well, I'm applying to it. It's very, very difficult to get a job with a terminal degree, actually. So even if you're like, I just want a PhD for fun, which is valid, that's kind of what I did. Like, I'm not saying that's bad, but it actually does not make you more marketable to employers. It actually is a detriment. I've actually considered taking it, unless I'm applying to like adjunct professorships or something, I've considered taking it out of my resume for if I want something like, sometimes I apply to like assistant director positions at universities in like health departments or violence prevention. And I've considered taking the PhD off my resume.
I think that this is just wise things for people to hear who are out there, like, because I feel very bamboozled by the academic industrial complex, TM. And I really want to encourage people to give thought to more out of the box thinking than just like the same way things have always been done. Because we're in a totally different age now where like you can deeply specialize in stuff without having to pay for the gatekeeping of university.
Right. Like for the money and the time and the energy, if I could do it all again, I would probably still do a master's, but I think my continuing education would just be not just retreats, workshops, series, like certificates. Those are the kinds of things I would probably do more of and actually get more, that would give me more practical experience and knowledge.
If I could get my $120,000 back from law school, and I went from 2000 to 2003, so that is like, imagine how much it costs now in public law school. If I could get all that money back and just invest it in producing workout videos and marketing workout videos, I would be a gajillionaire by now, like, but instead I didn't follow that path. I went and got a chronic digestive disorder and a lot of mental health issues. So, our body.
Right. It's yeah. It's definitely something if anyone out there who is considering doing a PhD or any terminal degree, take some serious time to think about it and talk to people about it. I also like I'm certified and trained as a holistic life coach. I do have people come to me who want to talk about career, and as a Capricorn, I love talking to people about their career path. I'm also my midheaven is a queer Aquarius, so I just love helping people figure out like unique ways to go about having a job within capitalism. So I would be more than happy to talk to you about it. It's just truly, if you are considering that path, really put thought into it. It's actually not a light decision.
No, and I think like, I mean, I hear again and again how people put like 10 minutes into deciding the career that they ended up in, which career is just long job. I also, as a Capricorn, love doing one-on-ones with people, and I call them business brainstorms, where I just kind of like help you figure out how to like run your life, like as a self-employed person, and like how to promote what you're doing, and like just It's interesting because I use the Reiki connection as like a kind of mystical way to connect with people's guides and just see this like highest version of themselves and like help to reflect that to them. And it's a lot cheaper to do like one-on-ones with people who can help you make decisions than it is to like go into years of effort and tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt to like realize on the back end, oh, maybe I could have thought this through differently. I mean, I had a dozen lawyers tell me don't go to law school and I still went. So like again, the ego self will tell you what you feel you need to be safe.
I love that. I want to do that with you. Like, that sounds really cool. I think that, yeah, that's a really powerful offering because I think, yeah, we do need to connect, especially we're in this really unique time and place where millennials and Gen Z, especially, have really had to figure out how are we going to survive in capitalism when traditional jobs are not as like we don't have the kind of access to them that maybe our parents did. Um, yeah, and we're all kind of like overeducated. Like it's just like sort of a disaster. I mean, we've really had to figure out how to carve out a place for ourselves. And I think it's really awesome that so many people can be self-employed and do their kind of dream kind of work or their role, their community role, their purpose, that they can find a way to make that their livelihood. And it's hard. Being self-employed is hard.
Yeah, you've been freelance, self-employed for a real long time. Do you have any tips and tricks you would offer people?
I would say for me, my like pros and cons list, the cons, I would say there's more pros than cons. I love working for myself. I love having my own schedule, etc. The cons are mostly financial. So there's the issue of health insurance. So thinking about how much you have to pay for health insurance and you'll still have pretty bad health insurance. So that's really hard. I think if you're like married or something and you can like have someone else's health insurance, it might be better. A lack of PTO, that's hard, not being able to take time off. Scarcity mindset is hard when, it's like I have to take 20,000 clients now because who knows where I'll be in 6 months. It's kind of hard to trust that the money will flow. And also, yeah, figuring out how to budget just in general so that you don't get into a place like that. I think most of the things I worry about, taxes, remembering to save money for taxes, um, those are more the things I worry about than anything. So I think if you're going to go the route of self-employment, um, maybe working with someone who knows the money part to like help you get that squared away so that you're prepared for the unique issues that come up financially when it comes to self-employment.
I found being self-employed, like I have released access to being middle class in some ways. Like I think some people can do self-employment and be solidly middle class, but I definitely like am just grateful to be able to be alive and have my rest ethic. And like I've really been, I added pet sitting to my cadre of gigs, like since my feline overlord Biscuit Reynolds passed away. And it's been really interesting to like say like this is as booked as I choose to be because like I'm running my schedule now through not just am I available on my calendar and like realizing from watching enough of my friends, especially my psychic friends, like kind of burn out on doing too many clients. Like I realized, okay, I can have 3 one-on-one clients a week. And then so that's been a boundary for a while. And then now with like pet sitting, I like kind of run the game. Like how would it feel? Not only is my calendar available, but also like how does it feel in my piece? And how does it feel in my intuition? And like maybe pulling some tarot cards if I'm not clear on a yes or a no. Like I love having great pet sits and I don't want to feel like I don't need to fill up all of my time with them, like it's kind of just like my fill in the blank, my fill in the gaps sort of gig. But some people can like make a lot of money at self-employed. And I think if you're willing to like do a lot of like intense strategy and communications work, I think you can, right? But I also like think I've experienced a lot of freedom, and my freedom is really valuable to me in being able to do less and prioritize my mental and physical health, which I think is certainly not something that even people with jobs are taught how to prioritize. All the PTO in the world is not going to solve it.
1,000%. And I think that's something that's why I would have a really hard time working for an employer, is just like the falsehood of the 40-hour work week. Because, arguably, depending on what I was doing, like teaching is different because you have different classes all day. But like in other situations, like job situations, it would feel like I could get my work done in 3 hours. Why do I have to sit here for 8 hours? I don't understand. So like, what is the purpose of this? I'm just sitting here.
Yes, it's
Yeah. And so go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, it's a performance. It's pageantry. It's not real.
It is. And so something I love about being self-employed is being able to say, I'm only going to work this many hours a day. That's it. And and to prioritize rest and to be like, I'm going to get my work done, but like, I don't have to sit here for 8 hours. I think something else to consider though with self-employment, depending on what you're doing, is you have to market yourself. And that is a job in and of itself.
I spend 6 hours of marketing at least for every hour I get to teach aerobics. And that is very sad to me because I love teaching aerobics, but I have to do all of this work in order to facilitate that 1 hour. And so it's, yeah, blessings.
Just free work. Yeah.
Yeah. And blessings to my members, because I love having a membership platform, which I do through Patreon, like, because like those are consistent clients, right? But like, everything else, every in-person class is its own marketing communication strategy. And yeah, I try my best to care a lot about all the communications work, and I do my best, and that's all I can do.
Exactly. That's all you can do. Let's try.
Just try. Exactly. And also, like, you just fail forward. You just keep seeing what works and what doesn't work. And like, I was having a lot of bummer feelings about like, what like the product, like the amount of people that were coming out for my classes in Seattle, the first like 8 months of this year. And I was like, well, objectively, it's just a failure. And like, I learned from failures, and then I fail forward and I try better. So I'm going to do another run and see how well I can do. And then I'm going to reassess whether I'm going to do that. Cause like I've been paying out of pocket basically to go teach instead of making money at it, which I would love to be able to do. So, just ebbs and flows. And it's my spiritual work really does roll into my business work. I don't think I could be self-employed without a strong faith.
Absolutely. Yes, 100%. Yeah, there's just a lot to consider with any major decision we're making about our lives, I guess. So get help, get resources, talk to people.
Yeah, and like just do the thing and try and see what it feels like. Melissa, will you tell us your coming out story?
I love this question because what counts,
Yeah. And which coming
my
out?
coming out, right. I mean, it's such an interesting narrative. I knew out the womb that I was attracted to people of all genders. Like as soon as I started having crushes, even just like watching TV and being like, so-and-so's cute or whatever. I mean, I knew that gender didn't really play a role in that. It wasn't until third grade that I started to realize that that wasn't how everyone felt. And what I remember very specifically is that, young people, prepubescent kids, tend to do body exploration with their same gender peers. That's like a very normal experience. So if that's been your experience, that's normal. If you didn't do that, that's also fine. But it is very normal. And I remember one time having a sleepover and my friend, a girl, saying, so who's gonna be the boy and who's gonna be the girl? And I said, why aren't we both just girls? And she looked at me like I had 3 heads. And I was like, oh, fuck. And I think that was the moment that I realized, like, I am different. Something's different about me. And that was something that was in my head for years later because I understood the cultural norm of straightness and I knew there was the idea of being gay, but I thought you could only be one or the other. And I just could not figure it out. I kept being, which one am I? Which one am I? Which one am I? I didn't know. And in the 7th grade, And keep in mind, I don't know how old your listeners are, but I mean, this is like the mid 90s. So there's not really like access to internet. You know, like there's kind of that joke of the am I gay quiz. I couldn't do that. Like we're done. The internet isn't really a thing yet. So I'm in the 7th grade, my best friend had a crush that was just like destroying her. Like she was so melancholy, but she wouldn't tell me who she had a crush on. And I didn't understand why. And finally, one day on the bus, I remember exactly where we were in the neighborhood on the bus. She said, like, okay, I'll tell you who I have a crush on, but I have to tell you something else first. And I was, okay, what? And she said, I'm bisexual. And I said, well, what does that mean? And, you know, again, mid 90s, and we're young. The understanding of gender at that time for us, she said, I like boys, but I also like girls. I literally yelled, oh my God, I'm that too. I was so excited to have a word to describe this thing that felt so isolating for my whole life. And so I started identifying as bisexual like at that moment. So I was like 13. And I would say from there, I mean, I was very proudly queer. My first quote unquote real relationship. So the first relationship I was in where sex was a part of the relationship was with a woman when I was 14, 15, 16. And I went to like, at the time, I grew up in Boston, but I actually went to high school in Maine. And so I was in like a suburban high school. I was like, I'm bisexual. Like I was really proud of it. I had no problem with like my teachers, my friends knowing, etc. It was my parents. But when I told my mom, so I told my mom when I was 16, and it was like an accident. My mom had found something of mine, like a letter I had written to like a friend because we were in a fight, and she had like rebooted the computer and it came up as like a recovered document. And my mother, because this is in the time of computer rooms, so you know this is like a very unique time. And my mom was like, you know, she saved this letter because she just thought it was sweet and she wanted me to have this when I got older or something, like, oh, remember your friendships when you were a teenager. But then when I found out, I was like, what if they wrote something in there though that you weren't supposed to know? You can't just read shit because it came up on the computer. Like I was so mad. And she was kind of like, what are you so angry about? Like, what are you worried about? And I said, I was like, it's same kind of language, unfortunately. But I said, like, well, you know, I like boys. I like girls too. And she just looked at me and she goes, I know. And she said that she didn't want to push me to tell her. So even though she thought that that was true, she said that she was waiting for me to tell her, which wasn't the right thing for me. I wish that she had approached me about it because I spent so many years being terrified to tell her. But yeah, so I think that was like the end of my like, you know, there's times that I've had to like come out over the course of my life or in different ways or like at work or, you know, whatever. But I think that was really for me the big relief was, okay, now my parents know. Now there's like no one else to tell really.
It's really interesting, right? How there's like that threshold and then it's like, I'll tell everyone now. Okay, how about coming out as polyamorous or non-monogamous? Was there like a moment where you realized and then declared?
Yeah, I think a lot of polyamorous people have this experience, which is that I've always been non-monogamous. I've just usually been unethically non-monogamous. So I have cheated on almost every partner I ever had. And what I couldn't understand was like, but I love this person that I'm with, but I also fell in love with this other person. And I knew that I had the capacity to love multiple people at once, but I didn't know there was a way to do that safely and ethically and kindly. I did go to therapy in my mid to late 20s for this. Like I was like, I need to stop cheating. I'm like really hurting people. And I had worked with a therapist on cheating. And I knew that non-monogamy existed because by this time, well, one, I've lived in the world, but also I'm in literally a human sexuality graduate program. Like I know that non-monogamy exists, but I didn't quite understand it. And I got into a relationship the year I turned 30 with someone who I think maybe 2 years into our relationship, I had expressed this is an AMAB non-binary person who, when we first got into a relationship, was identifying as a cis man. And I had said, like, you know, there's always going to be this grief for me around not being in a queer relationship. Like, that's always, I don't feel a sense of panic when I'm in a queer relationship that I'm like missing out on cis men. But when I'm in relationship with cis men, I panic. And they were very much just like, do you want to be non-monogamous? And I was like, no. But then we started talking about it. And the more we talked about it, the more we were talking about it from a more philosophical, political standpoint of like, you don't own people and relationships should have space to grow and evolve into how they're going to grow and evolve without there being strict rules around them. And realizing how many relationships we do have throughout our lives that are more complex than a simple box of like friend and partner, that relationships are complex. And so we had been talking about it for like a couple of years, and then I met someone and I was like, it is time. So that's how we got into it. And I feel like the same thing, that it was easy for me to tell my friends who were all very far left and feminist and, you know, within my sexuality graduate program, that was easy. Like, my professors couldn't have cared less, stuff like that. Work, you know, that was all easy. It was when I had to tell my parents. It's the same, even though I was now in my 30s, also being like, oh, I gotta tell my parents. My parents just think, Bevin, I don't know if you have this experience with people, but like, my parents just think I'm weird. Like, they just think, they're just like, Melissa, their like understanding of me is that I am just so countercultural. They just think I'm a very strange person. So they kind of just, when I tell them things, they're just like, yeah, all right, sounds like something you would do. And that was kind of their response when I told them about polyamory, is they were like, Melissa, if it makes you happy and everyone's safe and everyone knows, then I don't get it, but great. Like, they just really were just like, at this point in our lives, we've had it with all of the ways that you do things weird. So that sounds great.
One of the most powerful lessons I've learned in living near my mother is that I don't need her to understand me in order to feel her love for me. And I think I feel that way about like most people who think and people think I'm weird for like basic stuff like wearing bows all the time or like my flamboyant
I
feminine,
agree.
right? Like there's so much that's weird that it's like, it's fine. You know, like I don't really need to rely on other people for my self-esteem. I need like, and I think there's science around this too. Like you only need one or two areas in your life where you feel total belonging to bring that feeling everywhere you go and not worry about being accepted by randos in the monoculture.
I love that. And I think, yeah, I think a lot of my parents' understanding of me, the things that they think are weird, I don't even think are weird. Like, that's a weird one that you're like, wow, that's so counter to what we believe, you know? Like, I was at their house once and I had a headache and they, you know, were like, oh, do you want some Advil? And I was like, well, I was like, I might be dehydrated, so let me try drinking water. And they have decided that I hate Western medicine. I mean, I do as a system, but they're like, you would never even get a surgery. Like, I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, you took this and went so far with it. Like, you're making me sound like a conspiracy theorist. Like, I don't believe that, but that's how they see me. So
Wild. Oh, I love it. Well, Melissa, I see you with great love and adoration, and I'm so grateful you're in my life and that you are in the world too, and just sharing your perspective and gifts with everybody. Will you tell people vocally how they can connect with you, knowing again, it will be in the show notes?
absolutely. My website, melissafabello.com, has everything that you could possibly need. So information on working with me one-on-one as a coach or a consultant. I do consulting with therapists and educators, etc., on their work, how to do their work in a more politically aligned way. It has links to some of my writing, and it has links to social media stuff. But everywhere on social media, I'm at fyeahmfabello. It's short for fuck yeah, Melissa Fabello, which is like an old Tumblr joke. but
It is an old Tumblr
that's where
joke.
you can find me.
Very millennial of you.
It is.
Carrying on
It's very millennial of me. It's yeah, for people who don't get the joke, people would make Tumblrs about, let's say, fuck yeah, Taylor Swift, and it would be like a fan page to Taylor Swift. And so when I got Tumblr as a joke, made my Tumblr fuck yeah, Melissa Fabello, like to myself. And then I just used it everywhere in a shortened version. And now it's just stuck, but that's where it came from.
And Fabello has two L's, just like Melissa, for those of you who aren't looking at the show notes. It makes me feel sad for Chapel Roan that in this time there isn't fuck yeah Chapel Roan, because like, or fuck yeah Mudang.
I know. Maybe I'll get back on Tumblr and make one.
Is Tumblr still around?
It exists. I don't know that people are using it, but it's there.
It might be in the MySpace and LiveJournal graveyards. RIP.
Yeah. RIP.
So much time on those spots. Okay. Thank you for your time, Melissa. I adore you, and I'm just sending you so much love. And if you haven't watched the video for this, tune into the video just to see Melissa's beautiful tattoos.
Thank you.